So, are we waiting for all colleagues to join and do a roll call this morning?
Good morning, Prof. How are you?
Morning, SG. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm not sure what's going on, but ordinarily what would happen is that the Mudise, the public relations officer, would be on board to assist you with the roll call and hand over to you. Now seeing that maybe he's not online or they're not responding, kindly give me a moment for me to check what could be happening.
Oh, okay, no problem. No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, are the SADC Secretariat on this call? Is this the correct call?
Dr. Greenberg, indeed it is.
Good morning.
I apologize. It looks like our facilitator has a technical glitch. But at this point, colleagues, let me welcome you to the session and do a few preliminaries, which are important for us. Allow me to take you through a few preliminaries, which are important for us to engage in this meeting effectively. When you look at the icons, we have an interpretation. Yes, hello?
No, I was saying apologies, Madam SG. I was struggling with my audio, but it seems to be sorted now. I'm not sure if they can hear me.
Kindly proceed, Mr. Modise, thank you.
No, apologies for that.
We can hear you.
Thank you very much. Apologies for the delay, distinguished participants. My name is Modise Kabedi, the media officer for the SADC Parliamentary Forum. Apologies for the delay. I was having some technical issues on my side, but they seem to be sorted out. Welcome to today's session, which is the consultative meeting on the SADC model law on public financial management with the members of the academia. The session today is going to be conducted in English and French. At the bottom of your screen, there's an icon where you can choose the language of your preference between English and Portuguese. I'm sorry, English and French. There are those two icons at the bottom at the interpretation panel. And then in terms of the reactions, there's a reactions icon. You can choose the reaction that you would like to put, either clapping hands or choosing raising your hand, so that the facilitator can be able to give you an opportunity to speak. The session is going to be live streamed also on various social media platforms and recorded for broadcast on Parliament TV. You kindly request all the participants, when they take to the platform, to please ensure that their video is on, so that we can have both audio and video feed for the session. It is important also for participants to know that by participating in the meeting, they're giving consent that audio and video will be used on the various platforms as indicated. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if I have 2 seconds, seeing that I've delayed, just to take an opportunity to check on the people that are on the platform if they are properly framed, so that we can start with the session. Can I kindly request all the participants to please switch on their videos, so that we can ensure that we are properly framed for the session today and ready to go. Thank you very much. I see the screens are coming up and people seem to be properly framed. Can I have some more videos, please? Also, the naming convention that we follow on the platform. We start off with the institution that we represent, and then followed by your name. In my case, apologies for that, it should be SADC PF followed by my name, which is Mudise Kabedi. So we request everyone who's on the platform to please follow that naming convention in order to enable us to identify and link your name to the organization that we represent on the platform. So it should be the organization followed by the name. In your instances, it will be the institution that we represent followed by the name. Thank you very much. I see I'm dealing with experts today. All the people are properly framed, so you are used to this platform. Just 1 second to check if I'm before I hand over to our facilitator for today. And our facilitator is Professor Kamelin Govinda, who is the research director of HEAD, the Research Institute, and professor in the College of Law and Management Sciences at the University of KZN in South Africa. Prof, are you on the line? Please take over your facilitation.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, sir. I'm on the line. Before we begin the session, we need to do a roll call to see if all participants are active on the platform. Can you please give an indication of that?
Thank you, Prof. Maybe the way we can do it is just to check if we have any representatives that are on the platform and come from maybe, let's say, Angola, universities or academic institutions that are representing Angola or that are based in Angola. Any institutions that are based in Botswana? Do you have any institutions that are based in the DRC? Any institutions from Eswatini? Any institution from Madagascar?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Yes. Good morning, everyone. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you say. What institution do you represent?
Yes, the University of Antananarivo. So I am Professor Pierre Lazamanana. So I'm representing the University of Antananarivo.
Thank you very much, Prof. Can I kindly request that you please change the video from portrait into landscape so that we can be able to see your picture properly?
Okay, so I have to change the landscape?
Yes, to landscape, yes. Currently, I think it's a portrait.
It's okay?
I think it's still changing on our
Still
side.
done. Okay, right.
Thank you.
I'm moving.
Thank you very much. Can I move quickly to, after Madagascar, we go to Mauritius?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm K7 Padati, representing the University of Technology, Mauritius.
Thank you very much, sir. Malawi?
Everyone, I'm also from the University of Technology, Mauritius. I'm Anisha Bulaki.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Any more from Malawi? We don't have Malawi. Namibia? Anyone representing institutions from Namibia? I think I skipped Mozambique. Anyone from Mozambique?
Yes. Hello, good morning.
Good morning,
My
sir.
name is Manon Shufunga. I'm SADC PF Research Officer based in Mozambique. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
I'm also committee clerk for HIV and AIDS committee.
Thank you, Mr. Shifunga.
Okay.
We now move to the Seychelles. Any institution from the Seychelles? Anyone representing institutions from South Africa?
Hi, yes. Vincent Motono, CFO at the University of Cape Town.
Thank you very much, sir. From South Africa, we move on to Tanzania.
Hi.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, hello. My name is David Mwakapala. I'm representing the University of Dodoma from Tanzania.
Thank you very much, sir.
My name is Saudid Mwakaje. I'm representing the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania.
Thank you very much, sir. We now move on to Zambia.
Yeah, Zambia, we have Professor Chisepo Mpaisha representing the Zambian Open University, and Dr. Chungu Mwila and Mr. Leonard Mayaka from the Zambian Open University, Zambia.
Thank you very much, sir.
But I see my professor has disappeared. Maybe you would like to say something. Professor Mpaisha.
I am present and I agree with you.
Thank you, Prof. Can we now move on to Zimbabwe? Institutions from Zimbabwe?
Hi, everyone. It's Banam Kasir is my name. I'm with the coordinator of the Stop the Bleeding campaign, but it's an African campaign steered by 7 Pan-African networks. But I'm also with the Institute of Chartered Governance and Accountants of Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much, sir. Prof, I think we've done the roll call. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Much appreciated. Colleagues, a warm welcome to all of this morning. I know it's a busy time of year and we engage in university processes, and we thank you all the more for sparing of your time and coming on to assist us with this task. To say this again, my name is K. Marlon Govender. I'm a research director at the Herd Research Institute at University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. So colleagues, this morning we will undertake a consultative meeting as the brief that you've been given, which will focus on representatives from various academic institutions. The morning, early afternoon consultations is via format of a series of presentations and a preliminary session later on in the day. We have an agenda before us, and we will keep to the agenda and the time so that we complete the session by 1:30. For myself, I will be co-chairing the session this morning, and later on, I would need to leave the session because I have an urgent family issue to deal with, and I'm be accompanied by Mr. Shinui Karusha, who is part of the SADC program and is a manager for democratization, governance, and human rights in the SADC Parliamentary Forum, who will assist with the latter part of the day's proceedings. So colleagues, as a form of introduction, these consultations are really important. As you're aware, SADC-PF has a mandate to develop the model law and on public financial management, and it's going through a series of consultations in order to finalize this model law. The overarching objective of this model law will be to ensure that the SADC national parliaments are able to conduct their legislative, budgetary, and oversight functions for the public management processes to be transparent, efficient, and responsive to the needs of SADC citizens. This is crucially important in times that we live in, and given the need for public accountability and the operationalization of democratic processes in the region. For purposes of further enriching the model law and establishing a good practice, SADC Parliamentary Forum is undertaking a series of consultative meetings with various stakeholders across the region. And the point about this, as indicated, is to finalize this model law. And it's hoped that through the divergent views in terms of these processes, that best practices can be incorporated into the model law. So today is one such consultative meeting, and we would appreciate your views and your vigorous engagements in relation to the inputs made. More specifically, in terms of the expected objectives and outcomes of this engagement, we assume that participants have read the model law in advance and would give their views into the feedback and into the finalization of the drafting processes. That colleagues at this meeting, based on your experience, will provide some insights into the drafting of the law, and colleagues to engage in an open manner as best as possible to complete this. So, colleagues, that's a brief introduction to the purpose of this meeting. In terms of the agenda of the meeting, I will now hand over to Ms. Boema Sakoma, Secretary General of SADC PF, for a welcome address. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Director of Ceremonies. Allow me to recognize our keynote speaker, Honorable Dr. Kanyisi Lelishville Chabalala, Chairperson of the Parliamentary Network on Illicit Financial Flows, IFF and Tax, our distinguished representatives of academia institutions of SADC member states, recognizing all your hierarchies, Dr. Daniel Greenberg, our legal drafter for the SADC Model Law on Public Financial Management, in whom I'm pleased, members of the Technical Working Group for the SADC Model Law on Public Financial Management, our meeting facilitator, Professor Camril Govender, Research Director for HERD, the Research Institute and Professor in the College of Law and Management Sciences, the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, staff from the SADC parliaments and the SADC Parliamentary Forum, SADC citizens following proceedings on various social media, members of the Fourth Estate, the media, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It's with undivided pleasure that I welcome you to this consultative meeting with academicians hosted under the auspices of the SADC Parliamentary Forum. As you may be aware, the SADC Parliamentary Forum is accustomed to the development of targeted model laws to raise awareness and provide guiding legislative benchmarks for national parliaments on selected themes which are deemed to be most pertinent to the developmental discourse. In the past decades, the themes of HIV and AIDS, eradicating child marriages and protecting children in marriage, prevention and protection of key populations, gender-responsive oversight monitoring tools, free and fair elections, and gender-based violence have been covered by model laws and minimum standards developed by the SADC Parliamentary Forum, all of which have been finalized with the constructive support and astute acumen of academicians across the SADC region. Colleagues, in view of validating this long-standing practice, the consultations for the SADC Model Law on Public Financial Management have equally included distinguished academia across different universities of the SADC region, in view of distilling the model law into a finished product that responds to contemporary academic concerns, particularly at this case on public financial management. I wish to add that your presence at this August event further demonstrate the respect by the SADC Parliamentary Forum for public universities and other academic institutions in the SADC region. It is well known that academia constitute an unparalleled source of innovation, which is also a core value of the SADC Parliamentary Forum. And thus, the SADC PF and academia have always walked hand in hand through building knowledge and a community of practice. Colleagues, we have engaged you today as representatives of academic institutions because you are the center of public financial reforms. You brainstorm and work on dissertations and theses on the budget process, on government borrowing, state expenditure, and ways to improve good governance, to mention but a few. You are often noted as observers and commentators of the evolution of the democratic framework and are constitutional experts in your own right. Colleagues, often academicians lead debates on financial irregularities and denounce fiscal scams and scandals, along with the media. You engage in constructive criticism and evaluate the robustness of financial system that benefit both sides of the aisle in our parliaments. Furthermore, we have witnessed your participation in budget debates outside of Parliament, where you have critically evaluated the main budget measures taken by the executive. The institution of Parliament has studied your writings in journals, in newspapers, particularly on public financial management in this case. We have looked at your own online contributions, your print press, and your views are highly valued by both the local and international community. That is why most of you are cited in some of these journals. Dear colleagues, often legal reforms are also initiated within universities. SADC public universities are frequently the host of collaborations with the Attorney General's office, whereby legal proposals are made by students and proposed to line ministries through joint academic papers or journals. Some universities in SADC, such as the University of Pretoria, through the Center for Human Rights, which led in the development of the first ever model law developed by SADC PF on HIV and AIDS, also produce high-level articles which have helped to move mountains, both as executive and parliamentary level. Without doubt, the virtues of academia in the public financial management discourse cannot be overstated. Dear colleagues, today it is expected that you consider the various provisions of the model law and that you engage openly and frankly with Dr. Daniel Greenberg, our legal drafter. As academicians in public financial management, you may have also taken stock of public financial management systems in other geographical areas around the globe. Your comparative analysis will thus be helpful to improve the provisions of the model law and assist in conveying the final touch to the legislative provisions. You are invited to create a lab with parliamentary staff beyond the adoption of this model law and help us publish more on public financial management and parliaments. Furthermore, the SADC Parliamentary Forum will, through the technical working group, invite you to write about the model law and its merit from a critical perspective and to trigger academic debates and journalistic writings on the benefits which may trickle down to the SADC citizenry through the incorporation of the SADC model law for domestication. Colleagues, in particular, you may wish to comment on Part 7 of the model law relating to the national budget and to the statements which accompany the budget documents. You will note that the model law consecrates the existence of additional statements to accompany the budget document, including the Sustainable Development Goal budget statements, Section 66, and the International Commitment Statement, Section 67, which will provide visibility on the range of commitments taken by government. Colleagues, the principle espoused behind this innovation is that commitments taken by the executive should not remain as empty promises, but should be monitored every year in view of assessing the degree of compliance. Hence, the budget being the main governmental measure to disburse funds and commitments taken requiring funding, the budget document must be expressive of the ways and means in which budget lines items are implemented, including the SDGs and other commitments. I hope you'll take interest in these sections. Colleagues, the statements will ensure that stakeholders, including yourselves, can follow up on the progress made. Thus, this will mark a remarkable step ahead of the current situation where stakeholders are usually pushed in waiting for updates from ministries or departments, when part of this information could already be available at budget time by expressive budget lines. In addition, yourselves as academicians present here today, you may wish to consider the rationale of parliamentary control and oversight, which is embedded in Part 6 of the model law, and consider the enhanced powers of the Public Accounts Committee. For the first time ever, the Public Accounts Committee will be able to consider diverse reports concerning public financial management and make detailed referrals to anti-corruption agencies. There are thus ample innovations in the model law which should surely interest you both as academics and citizens of SADC. Dear colleagues, distinguished participants, I'm pleased to share that the SADC Parliamentary Forum is now endowed with a dedicated institutional organ to monitor progressive domestication. The organ is constituted of the chairpersons of all the SADC Parliamentary Forum regional standing committees, and it is thus encompassing all the relative issues that the executive may look at even at national level. It is expected that beyond the adoption stage of the model law, you will be involved to contribute to the domestication process through consultations and reporting to this committee. This will be in addition to the reporting which is conducted in tandem with line ministries and other direct stakeholders in public financial management. These are some of the post-adoption strategies we may begin to labor. Before I end, I wish to state that the SADC Parliamentary Forum acknowledges the path ahead towards full domestication of the model law on public financial management. It will be long and tedious, which will be moreover impossible without the intellectual contributions of yourself from the academic world. We believe that you are well-wishers for the state and are intellectuals who promote socioeconomic development through the novelty of ideas. We believe that you believe in the rule of law, and as well as the need for checks and balances in relation to public financial management transactions conducted under the umbrella of the state. Robust public financial management thus occurs fully within the academic domain and spirit. The path towards a thriving democracy that is buttressed with robust public financial management is a long, winding one. Yet the SADC Parliamentary Forum is confident that academia will act as an intellectual facilitator to this noble endeavor. With these few words, I thank you for your kind attention, and I wish you a pleasant and enriching session. Thank you, Mr. Facilitator.
Thank you, Madam SG, for such an invigorating opening address. I think you pointed to some key moments in the discourse of public financial management, and your last words about coming the full arc and connecting democracy with robust public financial management and domestication processes that impact eventually citizenry of SADC will be an important moment and a victory in this long path. One or two other points that were noted in your address with the academic sector being the important facilitator of this dialogue. And importantly, you've pointed out that the academic sector has been the forefront of previous model laws in this regard and continue on that path and bring and add to the the good SADC PF in getting this law realization. So thank you very much for your input. I would now like to invite our honorable guest, Dr. Kanyesile Litchfield Shabalala, who's the chairperson of the Parliamentary Network on Illicit Financial Flows and Tax. Please, just a second. Having my machine. And I've meant to have a more deep bio for the Honorable Doctor, and don't have with me at the moment. Dr.
Prof, your bandwidth is letting you down.
Let's see again. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Once again, a warm welcome to Dr. Kanyesile Litchfield Shabalala, who's the chairperson of the Parliamentary Network on Illicit Financial Flows and Tax. And by way of a bio, an introduction to the Honorable Doctor, Dr. Litchfield Shabalala has been a facilitator, trainer, and public speaker and writer and consultant on illicit financial flows and tax. A veteran of Umkhonto Sizwe and an exile freedom fighter, Dr. Litchfield Shabalala came back and joined the South African Navy early in her career, where she rose to become the first female admiral in the history of the South African Navy, and now is presently retired. Post the Navy, Dr. Litchfield Shabalala joined Parliament. She's had a 16-year public service career in human resources, including gender mainstreaming, equal opportunities, equity, as well as institutional cultural dynamics and change. Over the 10 years of experience in Parliament, she has undertaken research on transformation, organizational development, human capacity development. Dr. Litchfield Shabalala has an honors, master's, and a PhD degree, and has a number of projects and project experience and implementation work with various international organizations and reports and publications of note. So once again, Doctor, over to you to deliver your keynote address. Thank you. Doctor, are you there? Hello. Connectivity may be an issue. Can you hear me, colleagues?
We can hear you, Prof.
Okay, all right.
We can hear you.
Good.
I'm trying to check on the participants who have logged in to see if Prof is on.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, we may proceed, Prof, and we may give Prof Chabalala an opportunity at the end of the session because I'm not able to pick up her name on the registration so that we save time. And in the interim, the secretary will communicate to check what could be the problem. If that pleases you, facilitate.
Thank you, SG, for that. So colleagues will move the schedule a bit and keep it a bit flexible. It could be that Prof. Lindsay may be having some connectivity issues. So we'll try to create a space for her later on the agenda and move on. My suggestion is that we move to the video clip and take that now. So with your permission, colleagues, let's make that input.
This is not about a campaign against multinationals just blankly. We would like to see clean businesses who come here, pay their taxes when they work with us. The idea of reporting all their profit in a small headquarters where there are only 2 or 3 people working there and overlooking the entire operation, which is 60-70% of it is happening in this continent, we would like that to stop.
Curtail abusive transfer pricing, for example, trade misinvoicing, for example. There's a lot of work that remains to be done.
We must indeed achieve the objective of stopping the bleeding, of retaining these resources on the continent, which are illicitly flowing out of the continent.
These scenes are not so dissimilar to one that happens every day across the African continent. A businessman goes into a bank and makes a transfer of funds to an offshore company. Little questions are asked and millions are funneled out of the country electronically in a matter of minutes to a territory where little or no tax is accrued. This scenario is also surprisingly legal. A senior government minister collaborates with a mineral company executive to stash money and profits earned illegally in a foreign bank. A woman gives $5,000 to a man in the hopes to get her whole family across the border illegally. This is a human trafficker. He deposits the money in an overseas bank where it is cleaned and legitimized. All these are examples of illicit financial flows, or IFFs. Money leaving the continent, being funneled into international, global, already developed capitals, and depriving African national economies of vital liquidity and resources. The campaign to stem IFFs, or previously termed capital flight, is by no means a new phenomenon and has recently received a boost by the revelation of the Panama Papers, an unprecedented leak of over 11 million files detailing wealthy individuals and numerous multinationals exploiting secretive offshore tax regimes has elevated the issues of illicit flows to the forefront of the global agenda and media scrutiny. The establishment of the high-level panel represented a watershed and new strategy to combat the illicit flows.
All started on a Sunday in Malawi. We were preparing for the opening of the African Ministers of Finance, Planning and Economic Development Conference in 2010. The room was full. We were really surprised with the response. And those who attended, they said, no, this has to go to the ministerial proper the following day. And we had a 2 hours discussion on it. And African Ministers of Finance, in their wisdom, they said, no, this is a development issue that is too important for the continent. We cannot allow this continent, the poor part of the world, to subsidize the rich part.
I sometimes refer to it as being like a hydra with many heads. And a strange hydra, when you cut some heads, by the time you get to the 7th head, the first one has regrown. It's so dynamic, it keeps on changing shape and form. So we have to be resolved to the fact that we will always be chasing, finding out new ways of illicit financial flow and trying to deal with them. That's the first thing.
GFI analyzes illicit financial flows, not only out of Africa, but out of other parts of the world as well. We did a study of illicit money going out of Africa. We were asked by UNECA to come and discuss it. We did so. This is going back 5 or 6 years now. UNECA was frankly fascinated with our analysis that the commercial component of illicit financial flows is bigger than the corrupt component of illicit financial flows. Because, quite honestly, the media had been, for years, enjoying its criticism of Africa for the amount of corrupt money that is going out. So we came along and said, yes, corruption's a problem, but the biggest part of this is commercial.
According to GFI, these are the 3 clear definitions of IFF as seen before earlier: corruption, criminal, and the commercial aspect. The estimated 50 to 80 billion US dollars that the African continent loses annually in illicit flows is about double that what the continent receives in ODA, or official development assistance. Moreover, based on the methodology of the Economic Commission for Africa, abusive transfer pricing and misinvoicing, the underreporting of amounts produced and profits made are another major source of commercial illicit funds lost forever.
When we then presented our report to the African heads of state and government, they adopted the report in full, adopted the recommendations that we had made, and then decided as African heads of state and government to follow up on the implementation of what had been the recommendations, which had then been adopted as decisions of the AU summit.
There's been a confluence of forces that have really given this a boost, and also, as you know very well, the birth of this was looking for how the continent can finance itself. And one of the immediate low-hanging fruits was the issue of illicit financial flows out of Africa. So I think it's firstly therefore leadership, secondly circumstance, and thirdly the strategy brought to this by the ECA.
So it's been an exciting work, and the whole purpose is to promote African development. And how do you promote it? There has to be resources. It's resource mobilization. And in that regard, What are the obstacles to resource mobilization? And one of the obstacles is illicit financial flows from the continent.
There is really nowhere else on the continent where there is a plug-in for policy and legislative shifts that we need to make on the continent to defend our outflows, other than currently the high-level panel. And they're doing a tremendous job because they've gone from beyond the report and letting it gather dust in somebody's office, but also looking at the systemic work that needs to be done, work with regards to policy and policy shifts, both at the ministerial, Ministry of Finance level, as well as bringing in civil society and regional organizations to make the necessary policy shifts that we require. It's good work that they do.
Even before the Panama Papers, they have managed to elevate the issue of international financial flows, at least, or illicit financial flows from Africa, at least, into an international issue. It's a global challenge also. So they anticipated the Panama Papers. Perhaps they'll be similar in future, but already the work of the panel has already put this into the fore, has already elevated this into a global issue, a global challenge, something requiring global action.
Illicit flows have steadily increased over the years in scale and magnitude, and fundamentally undermine our ability on the continent to achieve our sustainable development goals, impede transparency, and risk further increasing inequality and poverty. The campaign to stem IFFs is now galvanized under a wider context, incorporating an array of actors from civil society, tax and governance advocates, and government and parliamentarians.
We wanted it on the global agenda. It is now on the global agenda. So there are many people who are part of this campaign to stop the continent bleeding of these resources. So it's governments, it's civil society, it's business, it's everybody.
Our role we see as bringing the interests of citizens on the table to ensure that the design of policies that will ultimately curtail illicit financial flows and ensure domestic resource mobilization are policies that are not also at the same time leading to increased inequality and having a situation where it's already the poor that are already carrying the burden that are going to suffer out of that. And for that to happen, you need to have civil society organizations in the room to create that critical mass of actors to be able to again, demand that the politicians and the governments actually fulfill their commitments, honor their commitments in terms of what they said they are planning to do to curb illicit financial flows.
Firstly, do you even know that there's IFFs? And if you do, what does that mean to you as a political party? In election campaigns, in parties that are in parliament, because we just say MPs, some come from ruling parties, some from opposition. Those that are in ruling parties, how are you influencing your own ruling party in terms of IFF? But more so, because parliamentarians get a budget for constituencies, are you taking this as an issue at constituency level, where you are saying in terms of mobilization, how do I take this message and explain it to an ordinary African? I mean, Panama Papers came. For Africa, we say they came, they are gone. For most African communities, it has meant nothing. People don't even know what that is. So we are saying at APNIFT, it is your role as an MP to take this message to that lower level, because these are the people that vote and keep governments afloat. If they're not empowered to know what is going on, they are never going to hold governments accountable.
Accountability is also in need of another key building block to fight illicit flows: capacity. Capacity building of appropriate institutions across the continent is key to improving skills and enforcing financial retention.
We begin to see that capacity challenges or the lack of capacity is a critical issue for combating illicit financial flows and stopping the bleeding. In particular, one area where African countries have big problem is actually implementing the legislations and the laws that they have for money laundering and for corruption and for all kinds of activities, illegal outflow of funds. And so we're working very hard to strengthen these institutions so that they can become more effective in dealing with these issues, and they become better coordinated in terms of what they do.
A clear metric on the success of tracking illicit flows is also its subsequent retrieval. Headway has now been made in a number of countries, generating repatriation of funds and the curtailment of aggressive tax avoidance regimes.
But we need even improvements to track it better. Better accounting and international accounting standards, better capacity with customs officials, better capacity in drawing agreements and other things. I mean, even just identifying or tracking will take some effort.
Uganda recently won an international court case against a British oil company, and as a result of that case, gathered $423 million in income that they would have lost did they not have a capital gains tax policy and law in Uganda. Many African countries do not have that. And because Uganda had that law, they were able to go to international arbitration, win the case, and now have that income.
The cumulative effect of strengthening financial architecture, challenging banking secrecy, and reforming common tax orthodoxy reduces outflows and critically increases income on the continent. As the fight to stem illicit flows continues, the policy and legislative shifts being implemented by the panel will inevitably need to adapt to future innovative and more clandestine methods of outflows, preempting a drive to shift not only the legal structures, but also an overall moral offensive on IFFs and their consequences.
You know for a fact that basically everybody in the world is going to disapprove. It might be legal, but if it's immoral, and people understand what that immorality means in practical terms. But secondly, I think there's much greater commitment among governments throughout the world that where legislation doesn't exist, it must be passed. Where it exists, it must be enforced. That you need all of these agreements and benchmarks, standards and all that to ensure that you have both you can have moral motivation, please act correctly, but you must also have the law on your side to say those who don't act correctly, then the law can act against them. So that you see even the definition of what's illicit in terms of the law, as people understand the loopholes and so on, and the impact, the negative impact of these illicit flows in terms of the quality of the lives of many, many people.
Back to you, Prof.
Thank you. Colleagues, that was a really insightful insert. I mean, I think the point of that input is that Africa's lose billions of dollars, and an estimated about 3.74% of gross domestic product is lost to annually illicit financial flows, and it's and we know that there are global enablers of illicit financial flows, and key to that, I think the message is that where policy and legislature shifts need to occur, it needs to happen soon. Accountability needs to occur, and certainly technical capacity to be able to implement laws and monitor this in a consistent way. And there are, I thought it was very interesting to note that examples of good practice, for example, the Ugandan point on capital gains tax. So thank you for that that input. I think we could move to the next part of the agenda, and we'll now take a presentation by Mr. Daniel Greenberg. And Mr. Greenberg is well known to the SADC PF community. He is a highly experienced individual in drafting model laws and with many years of institutional experience and insights into the complexities of drafting these laws and has been very instrumental in guiding the technical working group on these processes. So over to you, Mr. Daniel Greenberg, for your input. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished facilitator. Good morning to you. Good morning, and thanks to our distinguished Secretary General, and welcome to distinguished participants from all academic institutions, and also, with your permission, Mr. Facilitator, I offer a welcome to SADC member states citizens who are joining us through a range of social medium forums, both live and in catch-up after the event. As has been mentioned by Her Excellency Distinguished Secretary General in her opening remarks, and as was mentioned in the video clip by a number of honorable participants that we just saw, the public financial management laws belong to the people of each jurisdiction, and they will work effectively only if they have the engagement and trust of the citizenry in each SADC member state. I wish to make two preliminary remarks before I move to share my screen and take distinguished delegates through one or two key points of the model law prior to receiving your comments, expositions, challenges, and questions, all of which we will welcome enormously. Those two preliminary remarks are as follows. First, I wish to draw the attention of distinguished delegates to a fact that will not have escaped those of you with considerable experience in the framing of legislation, that this public financial management model law requires to express a balance between a number of conflicting desiderata. In particular, I draw attention to the need to balance a simplicity of structure against a sufficient complexity to provide certainty in what is a complex and technical professional field. It is essential for effective implementation that the model law should be as simple as is consistent with the presentation of its principles. The structure has to be capable of being understood in order to be capable of being applied and implemented effectively. And we have tried, and I say we, because in this respect, as in all others in relation to the preparation of the model law, I am deeply indebted to the members of the technical working group, to whom reference has already been made today. And we have tried to maintain a simplicity of structure while at the same time providing a level of detail that provides a degree of certainty within this technical field. And distinguished delegates today will be no strangers to the challenge in this particular area of maintaining a degree of complexity that reflects the complexity of the underlying subject matter, and at the same time presenting it in a way that is sufficiently simple to be understood and applied. Similarly, indeed, arising out of that, we have tried to balance accessibility and accuracy. Accessibility in the use wherever possible of natural language terms, the presentation of propositions in a simple and accessible form with appropriate explanatory material, but at the same time remembering that these propositions have to be sufficiently accurate to be capable of ensuring compliance and compelling compliance within the public financial management engagement stakeholder community. Again, the balance between a clear adumbration of the law with a necessary flexibility to meet the evolutionary developments of the matters with which the model law deals. In no part is that as necessary and apparent as in part 12, which deals with crypto assets and cryptocurrencies. It would, of course, be possible to provide a clear snapshot of where regulatory principles stand at present in respect of crypto assets. And that snapshot would be doomed inevitably to instant obsolescence in a matter of weeks, never mind months or years, because crypto asset knowledge, I do not need to say to distinguished delegates today, who I am sure know a great deal more about this than I do, crypto asset technology and the regulation of crypto asset technology, the policy of the regulation of crypto asset technology is changing literally day by day. We therefore, in part 12, have attempted to balance the desiderata of clarity and flexibility by articulating the principles of regulation in accordance with the London School of Economics and Political Science Institute of Global Affairs Basic Principles for Regulating Crypto Assets, fourth draft, with the flexibility that arises from a mechanism for subordinate legislation and quasi-legislation to match the evolutionary development of those principles. So while we deal with what one believes will be the timeless principles of constructive engagement, effective classification, consumer protection, investor protection, cryptographic analysis, technological analysis, and constancy, we provide the mechanisms for developing those ideas in whatever way becomes necessary to reflect developments in the real world. And finally, there is the balance between principle and enforcement. I will take distinguished delegates in a few moments through the principles adumbrated in the model law, but mention was made in the video clip we just saw of moral responsibility, and moral responsibility does arise from articulation of principles, but it is not always sufficient in the area of legislation, and therefore we have to which I will return later, we have new offences and other enforcement mechanisms later in the bill, so that the persons at whom, the public officials at whom the model law is aimed, do have the ability to embrace the responsibility for the principles of the model law, but at the same time know that there are consequences for non-compliance that can be implemented effectively. My second preliminary remark is to echo something that Her Excellency Madame Secretary General said in her opening remarks this morning about domestication and transposition. The SADC member states each has a unique constitutional and legislative set of arrangements. The model law has to reflect those arrangements in such a way as to permit each state to absorb and apply through the domestication and transposition process the model law in a way that tessellates with the provisions of the Constitution and other legislative propositions without overlap and without conflict. There are therefore footnotes in a number of places in the model law that draw attention to particular contextualization issues, but throughout the model law it is taken for granted that contextualization will be required in the way that Her Excellency Madame Secretary General adumbrated this morning. And while a perfect tessellation is not always achievable in legislative drafting, in the legislative arrangements of a state, nevertheless, that is the aim at which one should target one's endeavors. With those preliminary remarks, I move to sharing my screen. And I ask the Secretariat to confirm that my screen is now visible to distinguished delegates.
It is visible.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I start with the aims and objectives to which I referred before. The clause 9 presents the objectives of fostering accountability, transparency, independence, and modernity through efficient and effective processes for raising revenue, expending revenue, accounting for revenue and expenditure, and parliamentary oversight. I draw the attention of distinguished delegates to the feature that this is not embedded in the preamble, although it is found there too. These are operative provisions of the model law that the courts will apply as purpose clauses in the implementation and application of the later, more specific provisions, obligations of the law itself. It is very much not an inert overview, it is an operative purpose provision. In that vein, clause 10 requires public officials to aim towards the optimization of revenue and expenditure, the prevention of unauthorized expenditure, the improvement of sustainability, and accountability and oversight on an effective basis. And in order to enhance stakeholder engagement and confidence in the system, clause 10.2 requires the development of specification of measurable benchmarks for testing success in achieving those outcomes, so that citizenry are encouraged and enabled to feel that the aspirations, the articulated aspirations of politicians can be tested in a real way against real world outcomes of expenditure and revenue raising. In a consultative forum a few weeks ago, we saw a video clip with young persons from a range of SADC member states expressing their views about public financial management, a subject on which I was rather surprised, Mr. Facilitator, to find that young persons had particular views, not thinking in my naivety that this was likely to be a matter of particular importance to young persons generally, and how wrong I was. And their trenchant observations and perceptive and penetrating observations included one that in particular stuck with me and made me very pleased that we had included a measurable benchmark for revenue and expenditure. And she said that she had no particular issue with the process of the raising of revenue, but she had a very significant anxiety to know that the expenditure was one that was fair in the sense of matching her needs as well as the needs of others. And she gave the specific example of herself as a dweller in a rural area, noting the significant expenditure in relation to infrastructure, including highways. And she said highways doubtless do bring her indirect benefits, but there are things that would bring her more immediate direct benefits, and she wants to see an equity in the disposition of the revenue expenditure, and measurable benchmarks towards that equitable distribution would be a feature possible under Clause 10. Clause 11 articulates the public financial management principles that, again, in an operative way, underpin the provisions of the bill: the transparency principle, accountability and participation, with formal and meaningful opportunities for the public to engage in the budget process and other aspects of public financial management, oversight principle, responsibility principle, and sustainability. The public officials who are required under Clause 11.2 to have regard to those principles are further required to do that by way of expression of and application of the public financial management values articulated in Clause 12: integrity, independence, impartiality, equity, professionalism, accountability, and responsiveness. Finally, in Part 2, Clause 13 accentuates the contextualization issue to which I adverted a moment ago, and to which Her Excellency, Madame Secretary General, adverted in her remarks, that contextualization is required in the context of, in particular, the Constitution and other legislative arrangements of each SADC member state. Part 3 sets out the authorities principally involved in controlling the public financial management system: the Finance Minister, the Finance Secretary as the head of the permanent civil service of the financial side, the general functions of the Finance Secretary, again aiming to combine a degree of certainty and accuracy with an element of simplicity and clarity. The role of the ministry, the functions of the ministry, and the pivotal role of accounting officers designated in each ministry or other unit as the crux of responsibility for the proper implementation of financial management obligations. Internal audit is now provided for in more detail than was the case at an earlier stage, and this arose out of a request in one of the recent consultative forums. The role of the Accountant General is also given a little bit more prominence than was previously the case, again at the request of delegates at one of the recent consultative forums. Part 4 deals with the public funds. We had at a recent consultative forum an observation from a delegate from the World Bank saying that in his view the funds was a bit archaic and should be relegated to the back of the model law, which I thought was a particularly unimpressive observation and showed a lack of understanding of how financial regulation works in ministries, in executives. The consolidated fund is not some kind of archaic concept. It is fundamental to the principles of accountability and transparency that all government funds are concentrated in a single accountable and transparent fund in the central bank, except where there is special hypothecation or other permitted arrangement. So I make no apology for the fact that Part 4 commences with public funds, and so far as I'm concerned, it will continue to do so. Other accounts are, of course, mentioned in order to circumscribe their departure from the centralization of the consolidated fund, and retention accounts, trading accounts, and debt servicing accounts, which that particular delegate said are a problem. Well, of course they're a problem, which is why we have to deal with them in a clear and enforceable way. And special funds I have included again at the request of a distinguished delegate at an earlier consultative forum. We are very anxious to take account of all comments and suggestions made at the consultative forums when they are, as they have, I think with that sole exception, been immensely constructive and helpful. And I look forward to hearing distinguished delegates' comments today to that effect. Part 5 deals with supply and appropriation, application of sums, appropriation and aid as a necessary tool, and it leads to the Part 6 parliamentary control mechanism with which distinguished delegates will be more than familiar, sitting on or brought within the envelope of the parliamentary engagement principle, the principle that the full range of mechanisms should be used. But here we have a specific contextualization and domestication difficulty. It is vital that the model law is not seen to be prescriptive to member states of how their parliamentary arrangements should operate. That's a matter for each parliament, and it must remain a matter for each parliament. So the mechanisms are listed in a way that will be contextualized during the domestication process, but the principle is that whatever mechanisms are used in accordance with the standing orders of each parliament should be tending towards the effective achievement of the engagement principle. The Auditor General's role is discussed in considerable detail here, and at an earlier stage of a consultative forum, I was asked to enhance the independence of the Auditor General by removing regulatory powers for ministers, which I have now done. And the audit function is set out on that basis, as for the National Audit Office, together with the reports, audits, and opinions. The Public Accounts Committee role, again, subject to the standing orders and procedures of each parliament, set out in clauses 50 onwards, including requirements for proper representation, including gender representation, and in a number of ways that the POC processes should be reflecting the political realities and circumstances of each country, but within an envelope of being informed about best international practice. The POC is mandated under clause 53 to operate a complaints portal so that the engagement, the real engagement of citizens is directed through a practical solution. And this fits, of course, with the whistleblowing protection in clause 55, which I do not need to explain to distinguished delegates today, is a sine qua non of effective financial regulation, because the persons who are in a position to reveal irregularities will almost always be internal and will almost always therefore require real and effective whistleblowing protection. Part 7 deals with the national budget in the ordinary way. Environment, again, we have to have flexibility but control. To say no environment is unrealistic. People do need to vie between budgets, and Parliament's time would be caught up entirely improperly if environment were not permitted. On the other hand, environment can, unregulated, completely dilute the public financial management controls. So we acknowledge it and we constrain it within the provisions of the model law. The budget process, based on a standard estimate and debate approach with a consultation, is enhanced by specific requirements for accompanying documentation, including departmental objectives, a sustainable fiscal policy statement, a sustainable development goal statement, international commitment and project statement, an equality and diversity statement to show that equality and diversity are at the heart of financial management policy, again going back to the equity that I mentioned a few moments ago in connection with the statements of young persons for their aspirations, and a past year and future implication statement, and a multi-year budget projection, together with a public debt statement picking up the provisions in the later part about public debt. Again, flexibility acknowledged with in-year developments through national adjustment budgets and in-year budget reports, but always within the envelope of ensuring that those do not dilute or undermine the parliamentary oversight controls. Government borrowing is dealt with in Part 8, with classification of public debt being a priority to ensure that we capture the widest range of events that are capable of imposing liabilities on the public finances. We then move to the strategy of debt management with publication of a strategy, the use of committees, and authority arrangements and borrowing arrangements that give an envelope for scrutiny and oversight. As I say, this is a wide envelope, including the issue of securities through agents and on lending. Again, the delegate the other day just from the World Bank said, oh, well, we don't do on lending is a bad thing. No, on lending is not a bad thing. On lending is sometimes a necessary thing, but it needs to not undermine the public financial management system. So again, we prefer to confront and contain real world issues rather than turning a blind eye to them. Guarantees and indemnities, again, a very effective way of providing government support, but they give rise to contingent liabilities that have to be included. Public debt statement and the public debt schedule form part of the budget documents described before. The ceiling limit, again, is not prescriptive. It's about engaging enhanced scrutiny processes to ensure that the scrutiny is effective as a method of containing and controlling growing debt. Part 9 deals with procurement and use of public resources. The procurement principle is set out, the procurement regulations are enabled, and conflict of interest management is discussed, as well as, again, for flexibility, acknowledging that there might be emergency variations, but that they must not dilute or undermine the entire process. Part 10 deals with public accounts in the normal way, using resource accounts as the modern effective way of reflecting a true and fair view of the public finances, and not only cash accounting, and scrutiny on that basis with a whole of government emphasis, again, to produce a truly true and fair view. The powers for obtaining information are provided in the ordinary way. Part 11, as I said before, provides the enforcement mechanism where responsibility fails. It's addressed to public officials generally, and it includes an offence of public financial misconduct and an offence of misuse of public funds, with penalties to be set out, contextualised as part of the domestication process in a proportionate and balanced way that reflects the criminal and penal policies of each SADC member state. Maladministration, which is not a criminal offence, but it is a tool for reports in relation to public officials, and for reasons of separation of powers, it therefore does not trigger a criminal penalty, but it does allow Parliament to exercise disqualification discretion in appropriate circumstances, a distinction from the criminal process, which again, the delegate the other day completely failed to understand. Part 12 deals with cryptocurrencies, and I have dealt with it in sufficient detail in my opening remarks. Part 16, I will simply draw the attention of distinguished delegates to the flexibility achieved through the making of supplementary regulations and the issuing of guidance, which I think is very important, quasi-legislative regulation in this field, but always subject to parliamentary scrutiny and control, which is the essence of the democratic public financial management system. Mr. Facilitator, that concludes my remarks, and I see I am exactly within the time allotted to me, and I therefore turn with eager expectation to the questions, challenges, and comments of distinguished delegates present here today. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Greenberg, for your detailed and comprehensive presentation on the model law. Colleagues, some overarching comments from my side that would possibly a prelude to a question and answer session and a mediated conversation. It's important to note, I mean, that a strong PMF system is essential, is an essential aspect of an institutional framework for an effective state. I think that there's a consensus on that, and the outcome of a strong PMF system is effective delivery of public services that, importantly, is closely aligned to poverty reduction and growth. And countries with, we know, with a strong and transparent and accountable PFM system has the ability to deliver services in a more effective and equitable manner. It's also important to note that the strengths of a PMF system is possibly based on three important aspects. One is leadership, strong political and technical commitment, clear communication, coordination of the reforms, and managing fear expectations and divergence of opinions on the processes. I think also a policy space for developing appropriate reforms needs to be pointed out. And Mr. Greenberg has indicated in sensitivity towards contextualization of issues and managing the checks and balances, domestication of the law, absorption, application, but also managing overlap and conflict. So, and within that framework, the aim is to achieve the highest possible form of the law. And the third point is, an adaptive, iterative, and inclusive process where monitoring, learning, and adaptation is key to this. The point about cryptocurrency has been well, and this is the interesting area, I would think, to continue developments of crypto assets markets and including, the maintenance of knowledge on emerging international best practices in this regard. And I think a key element in this area, digital literacy, digital financial literacy levels must be increased amongst consumers, potential consumer of cryptocurrency assets. So those are important areas which require a collaborative space and a joint approach to the management of crypto asset regulation. So thank you, Mr. Greenberg. And the points that you also mentioned that tracks back to what the SGS pointed out, particularly for this consultation, is the importance of academia and the history of academia in having a critical analysis on discourses of public financial management and how academia can lend technical capacity, support, and engagement and robust engagement on the drafting of the policy. So there's a historical track record for academic institutions in the region on engaging with these issues. And so it's not new that we are now engaging in this consultation process to be able to further elicit views and perspectives from the academic sector in this regard. So thank you once again for that. And as we move forward in terms of the agenda, we're at 11:35, and here we are meant to have a preliminary deliberations, and now we'll open the floor to participants to make interventions in terms of considerations for finalizing the model law on PMF. So permission from colleagues, I will open the floor and take a first round of comments in response to Mr. Greenberg's presentation. To begin with, we take 3 or 4 comments. Colleagues, please keep your comments pointed and specific, and so that Mr. Greenberg is able to apply his mind to those to the issues that may arise, and then we'd ask him to respond, and then we take the next round of comments. Thank you, colleagues. The floor is now opened.
There's a hand from Stop the Bleeding.
Ah, okay, all right. Please go ahead.
All right, thanks very much, Daniel Greenberg. I think that was a bit comprehensive and clear. I have got 2 comments. The first one speaks to the statements that should accompany the budget. And I find it that when we started this conversation, there was a powerful presentation of the high-level panel report on illicit financial flows from Africa, which indicated that this is a scourge when it comes to sustainable revenue raising or financing for development for African countries. And I see that we are not having a statement also on what is being done to curb illicit financial flows. I think that is critical. Much as we talk about a statement on debt sustainability, I think more importantly, the capacity to mobilize revenue is can give that necessary or sufficient bandwidth for the public financial management to deliver on its key goals like efficient service delivery. So that's number 1. Then number 2, I'm not clear how we are supposed to frame this, but I think in part of the outcomes of public financial management, they clearly spelled out that they want to curb unauthorized expenditure. But we are also noting that there are instances where revenue can be raised and not secretly raised to undermine the public financial framework. I'm not sure how best we can couch that, but we also not, in addition to unauthorized expenditure, needs a provision there on revenue. Thank you.
If I may respond to the distinguished delegate for the Stop the Bleeding campaign. The first point that he raises, I think, if I may say so, is a very powerful one. And although I suppose there is some slight reluctance to proliferate the number of documents endlessly, there must, each document accompanying the budget carries a certain administrative burden and so on. But certainly listening to what he says, and given the emphasis that's been placed throughout the consultative process on the prevention of illicit financial flows, I would certainly be very happy to incorporate a requirement for an illicit financial flow control statement as part of the budget documents. And unless the distinguished members of the technical working group have any difficulty with that, I will seek to incorporate that accordingly. On his second remark, the draft does already deal with unauthorized expenditure on exactly the basis that he says. I completely agree with what he says. We have to acknowledge that it will sometimes happen, and when it happens, we want to be able to address it within the envelope of the Public Financial Management Act and not simply have it, as he says, fall off the radar and be dealt with entirely sub rosa. So I agree with the observations that he makes on that, and I believe they are already matched by provisions of the model law.
Thank you for those. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you so much for the presentation by Greenberg and the other presentations that have been made earlier on. My name is Mayaka from Zambian Open University. I just wanted to raise one particular issue. First, I should say that I had an opportunity to go through the document. May not have had that opportunity to really go into too much detail, but I did read some aspects of it. Now, I'm looking at, you did indicate the role of the Auditor General's Office, which is very, very critical in public sector financial management. But at the same time, I think we need also try to recognize the responsibilities of the internal audits within the various ministries. Because if the draft also speaks of the external audit, I think also that we need also to maybe incorporate aspects of the internal audit, because if the internal audit departments in the various ministries are consolidated and supported, then we may have certain exceptions not being raised by the Auditor General's Office. So I don't know, maybe that aspect could have been looked at. I'm not really very certain, because maybe there could be certain aspects of the document that haven't finalized looking at. Then secondly, the role of university is very critical, and you did mention that one, Mr. Greenberg, in your submission. And I think at a certain point, you also raised the issue of constituency development fund. I think that was raised by a presentation on the YouTube. One of the presenters indicated that it's critical that constituency development funds by the implementers are properly implemented and and followed up. So the role of the university in that area would be to create capacity, in these constituencies, so that we don't have funds misapplied. At least the universities should be able to see if they can create a capacity in terms of financial aspects on how to handle these particular funds in constituencies. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Over to you, Mr. Greenberg.
I am extremely grateful to Professor Mayaka for his...
Mr. Mayaka, sorry, Mr. Mayaka.
I beg his pardon. I am extremely grateful to Mr. Mayaka for his penetrating observations. On the matter of internal audit, I fear that, and this is entirely my fault and not his, I fear that the document that he scrutinized before the meeting may have been the document produced before the clause on internal audit that you saw in the presentation I made on the screen a few moments ago, because that was found in a draft that I produced to reflect comments made at earlier consultative forums. So he will not necessarily have found it in the version that he looked at, but his point is not only well taken, but is reflecting comments that were made by other delegates at earlier consultative forums, and internal audit is now dealt with in more detail for the reason that he gives. On the question of constituency development funds, I think that's very, very, very difficult, as he says, for the reasons that he gives. It's a very difficult one, this. And I think it's hard to be prescriptive beyond the public financial values that we've already articulated in relation to constituency management funds. And I think in the end, it comes down to the point that he made. This is about investor control. Funds of this nature, and indeed the retention funds, the special funds, all the other hypothecated funds that have the potential to undermine the public financial management system, they need to be controlled by effective investor stipulations, by effective guidance. We looked at the guidance at the end of the model law, internal enforceable guidance within the government. These are things that I think need to be done for the reasons that he says. I'm not convinced that in relation to the specific example of constituency development fund, there is much more that we could say on the face of the overarching model law itself. But nevertheless, his point is taken and deeply appreciated.
Thank
you. Mr. Mayaka.
Yes, thank you.
Is there a further comment on that?
I think it's okay. It's been addressed because it's important that we have first and foremost, even the document talks about key performance indicators. So even constituency development funds, we need to be able to identify in which areas they're expected to be implemented, and it to be easier that way to follow them up so that activities are implemented as per original plan. Because this is public sector financial management, and the outcome and the assessment is based on whether the activities have been implemented or not, if it is compared to maybe private sector, where maybe we're looking at shareholder, shareholder funds and the fact that are we paying dividends and so on and so on. But in public sector, we needed to ensure that the activities are implemented and the social objective is fulfilled. So I thank Mr. Greenberg for actually responding to that ably. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, sir. I think we could take another a round of questions. I see a note by Chris. Your speaker is on. Please go ahead, sir. Madam. Okay. We're not getting any, probably the connectivity issue. Colleagues, we'll take further questions, comments. While we wait for further comments, there we go. Pia, please go ahead.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup pour l'excellente présentation de honorables présentateurs. Ma question porte en fait sur la partie 8, donc sur la dette publique. Alors, nous avons donc, nous avons eu donc dans les documents, dans la loi type, les seuils de ne pas dépasser 50% du produit intérieur brut. Donc, pour la dette publique, donc dans la région SADC. Et ma première question, est-ce que sur quelle base nous sommes basés, donc, enfin, le document s'est basé pour ces seuils? Est-ce que c'est la moyenne au niveau de la région SADC? Ça, c'est ma première question. Et effectivement, dans la partie 9, en parlant donc des contrats des marchés publics, donc qui ne doivent pas dépasser les 3% également donc, du PIB, dans le cas où les contrats ne figurent pas dans le manifeste électoral donc, du gouvernement. Et ma question, en parlant donc du manifeste électoral du gouvernement, est-ce qu'on se réfère à la politique de développement du gouvernement ou seulement à la politique générale de l'État? Parce que, en fait, cette question, c'est pour ne pas mettre donc, sur les prérogatives des prochains gouvernements les dettes qu'on contracte, notamment dans les contrats publics, de marché public. Donc, ma question, est-ce que sur quel document on se base réellement donc, en parlant donc du manifeste électoral du gouvernement? Et comme dernière question, par rapport aux dépenses publiques supplémentaires, en parlant donc de notamment en cas de catastrophe, on parle généralement, on parle de corruption parce que pour la gestion donc, des finances publiques, ces dépenses supplémentaires, notamment en cas de catastrophe de sécheresse ou de cyclone, ces dépenses supplémentaires sont tellement exubérantes, tellement très grandes, qu'on n'arrive pas généralement à avoir donc, une transparence. Donc, comment alors gérer? Et moi, j'ai envie de faire déjà une suggestion pour ça. C'est vraiment, si c'est possible, pour les pays les plus exposés, par rapport à ces dépenses publiques supplémentaires, vraiment de les insérer tant que possible dans le processus d'élaboration donc de planification budgétaire. Merci beaucoup de votre attention.
Taking those points in reverse order, if I may, I very much agree respectfully with the concerns about disaster-related expenditure. There are two ways in which the draft model law addresses this. First, the adjustment budgets in clause 66 are designed exactly as Professor Lazamanana says. They are designed to ensure that when in-year adjustment of the budget is required to meet disasters or other unforeseeable contingencies, the controls are not simply abandoned. And similarly, from a procurement perspective, Clause 97 deals with, again, adjustments for emergency procurement, again, modifying but not abandoning the systems. So I respectfully concur with the point that he has made, and if he feels that the point could be reflected elsewhere in the model law, any written submission that he cares to make on that subject will be accepted with extreme gratitude. On the question about thresholds within Part 9, yes, the regulations will indeed be able to set appropriate thresholds, both differentially and by way of exceptions. Finally, his first point, the 50% threshold is a policy decision taken at a secretariat level, and it may be that Her Excellency, Madame Secretary General, will address that in her closing remarks. I would simply repeat, if I may, that the ceiling is not in any sense a prescriptive substantive ceiling. It is a trigger for enhanced scrutiny and enhanced oversight. So we're not attempting to describe what is the optimal maximum of debt for any particular state at any particular time. And were we to do so, I think we would be doomed to failure. What we're doing is and this very much speaks to his question about what level of policy are we aiming at? And what we're doing is we are entrenching in the legislative policy of the state the concept of an aspiration that debt that exceeds the 50% threshold requires to be subjected to a higher level of scrutiny, the implication being that the 50% threshold marks an acceptability margin, if you like, within the public policy. I hope that addresses to some extent the concerns that he has adumbrated.
Thank you for that. A next round of questions, colleagues. Mr. Greenberg, a point about the challenges of regulating crypto assets, and possibly a comment on your side, a perspective on this. Given these can be decentralized and disintermediated nature of the crypto assets, it's challenging to regulate this at a global level, and because it's potentially classified under various economic functions, and the responsibilities for regulation often cuts across various regulators, national jurisdictions, etc. How do you see a kind of a coordinated approach to dealing with this challenge? Any thoughts or insights from your side?
Well, yes, for the reason given by you, Mr. Facilitator, I believe that any coordination has to be at the level of principle rather than at the level of operational regulation, so that the principles of crypto regulation are, I think, already capable of being articulated in a way that captures the approval of the majority of academic and other stakeholder commentators. Investor protection and consumer protection, it's not difficult to articulate the core concerns in relation to crypto assets, but each SADC member state, its financial regulators, its central bank, must be left to find an operational mechanism of implementing those principles in a way that is consistent with its overarching financial policies. So to me, the challenge of the model law is to articulate coordinating and shared regulatory aspirations while leaving complete flexibility to each SADC member state to find the appropriate articulation of those principles in the context of their own regulatory practice.
Thank you for that comment. Colleagues, further comments, questions? I see in terms of the agenda, we are at 12 o'clock, and there is still an insert on the agenda that was planned by the Honorable Dr. Kaisile Litchfield Shabalala, and I'm asking if the Honorable Doctor has come through, possibly come through while we were in conversation. Possibly, okay. I don't see the name appearing. I would think we could take a last round of comments, colleagues, or Mr. Greenberg, and then we'd move on the agenda. Okay, no further comments. So thank you, sir, for your insights into the draft model law and taking questions and giving a further perspective on the issues. I think the points that you made on including the illicit financial flows incorporation into the requirements, and your note that on the role of the constitutional development funds, and what are the complexities in managing this within the document, and the note about the last comment, disaster management issues that can be looked at in terms of the law. I see there's one. Klaus, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, and apologies, I only joined now because of other commitments. My name is Klaus Schade. I'm an economist based in Windhoek, Namibia. I might raise issues that have already been discussed before, but since I couldn't attend from the beginning, I would just like to draw attention to a few points. First of all, the draft model law makes reference often to not very specified time frames. It's indicated as soon as reasonable possible, and so I believe we can be more ambitious with these time frames. For instance, when it comes to the submission of financial statements by votes and ministries to the Ministry of Finance, and then afterwards also by the tabling of the audit report, that we set clear timelines in line with international best practice. For instance, in Namibia, the votes or the ministries need to submit their financial statements latest 7 months after the end of the financial year, and the Auditor General needs to submit his or her audit reports a year after the end of the financial year. I'm not sure whether there are any timelines in other countries, but I believe it would help if we have clear timelines. It will instill a bit of discipline and commitment. Also, when you refer to publications, and these publications that are tabled in Parliament by the Minister or other institutions, that these publications should be made as soon as possible on the Ministry's website. Again, I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be uploaded immediately after the presentation has been made, because the document is available. It has been prepared and presented, and it could be immediately on the Ministry's website, but maybe not just on the Ministry's website, also perhaps on the Parliament's website, and in case of Auditor General's report, also on the website of this institution, and it applies to other institutions as well. That will certainly increase transparency, but also support the debate in the country. When it comes to the national budget, what I missed, I haven't seen it mentioned, is that the Minister of Finance should table a detailed budget calendar that covers the whole period from the first meetings with the executive directors or the secretaries or whoever accounting officer is responsible, to meetings with public or with the private sector, with CSOs, tabling of the budget, midterm budget review, Auditor General reports, audit or accounting reports, whatsoever. So the whole, all these different stages of the whole budget process should be presented with clear timelines and clear dates. That again, it helps to support discipline, that it's not dragging on too long, and it's also much easier than for Parliament to follow up with the respective ministry on the process. Yeah, sorry, let me just something else. Yeah, in the budget, I think what would also be helpful, information that is often missing when it comes to foreign loans, foreign grants, debts, public debts, that there is no detailed table with the maturity of debts, with the conditions, the interest rates, and so on and so forth, so that that Parliament, but also the public, is well aware of the commitments government has entered into with other governments or with other financial institutions, and so on. We have in general usually foreign borrowing, domestic borrowing, and so listed in Namibia in the fiscal policy strategy, and so. But these details, they are not there, and it's very important also for an assessment of fiscal stability, and so to know about the extent of these loans, the conditions, and the maturity of these loans. And then also one suggestion concerning the tabling of the budget. It's mentioned it should be tabled before the beginning of the financial year. Again, I would suggest we could be a bit more ambitious and say that, if possible, the budget debate in Parliament should be concluded before the beginning of the financial year, because then ministries could immediately start with the implementation of the budget. Otherwise, as long as it's not approved, first, they do not have the funds. Secondly, they might not know exactly whether they will receive funds for certain programs, and that delays the implementation of the programs, and then might result in underspending at the end of the year, because this whole process has started late. So ideally, the budget should be tabled, let's say, 2 months or even more before the beginning of the new financial year, and then the appropriation bill is approved and then gazetted before or slightly into the new financial year, but not 2 or 3 months after the financial year has already commenced. And as I said, it results in unnecessary delays, program implementation, execution, and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Klaus, and for those comprehensive remarks. Mr. Greenberg, would you like to address those comments?
Yes. So Professor Sharda did miss, as he says, my earlier elucidations around the need to balance certainty and flexibility in this model law, and his comments to some extent illustrate the difficulty of striking the balance between clear structure and principle and allowing flexibility to reflect the circumstances of each SADC member state. On that basis, I'm not attracted, I have to say, to the first of his suggestions, if he will forgive me for respectfully saying so. I would like to remind us, of course, that the phrase "as soon as possible," when used in a model law, is not an idle aspiration. That is something that will be enforced by the courts in accordance with the principles of administrative law. So it's tight without being prescriptive. And I don't know what will be a reasonable delay in a particular state at a particular time. And if I say 3 days, that might be too much. And if I say 100 days, it might be too little. So I think what is important is to articulate the timeline and the time pressure, and the appropriate way of doing that is to provide for something to be done as soon as is reasonably practicable in an enforceable and effective administrative law proposition. However, if I may respectfully say to Professor Sharda, I am much more attracted by his second proposition of including a reference to tabling the timeline along with the budget. I think that probably is a good idea, that we could reflect without any unreasonable degree of prescription. In relation to, just moving his fourth comment before I come back to his third, if I may, in relation to his point, though, about, you must say you must table it if possible before the financial year. Well, the words "if possible" make the point, don't they? That we can't prescribe something that may turn out to be not possible to comply with in practice. So the requirement is to ensure that the principle of the timeline is articulated properly. And I think we do that. If Professor Schade has some specific instances in which he thinks that that principle, without undue prescription, could be sharpened in the bill, then any written submissions he makes to that effect will be enormously welcomed. On the question of foreign loans and grants, yes, those will, of course, form part of the debt schedule. Whether we should require them to be separately enumerated is another matter. There is a comment in the chat from Tobias Manaisenga, where he says, in the preamble there is no verb in some places. Well, that's true and is quite common. He says, instead of shall be, I use the auxiliary verb is. It is an offence. The proper legislative sentence should be, or it shall be, an offence. No, that's not true. International practice varies, and our drafting style in this model law is to combine a modernity with an acceptability within SADC member states. It is an offence is actually accurate. What you're saying is, if a person does this, they are committing an offence. We do use shall in a number of places. As Professor Manaisenga will know, the word shall is not favoured in many jurisdictions. I was given an instruction, a very helpful instruction from the technical working group and from the Secretariat, that I was to use it in this model law because that is the tradition in SADC member states, and I have done so accordingly very happily. But that doesn't mean you have to use it where you use it where it is conferring an obligation. It shall be an offence. He's not conferring an obligation, it's stating the law. And therefore the appropriate simpler form is it is an offence. If Professor Manaisenga would like to discuss any other drafting details and compare different practices, I am, of course, at his disposal outside the meeting.
There's a contribution on the chat. If the facilitator could kindly allow.
No, that's what I've just. I think that's the one I've just dealt with. That's what that's the one I've just dealt with, Secretary General.
Thanks.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Greenberg, for addressing that point. And so the earlier point that was referred to in the previous comments about the issue of principles of timelines, and I think you made the point that you're open to a comment about if that could be stated or articulated in a better way, and that's open for.
But I'm not attracted to the idea of setting out particular numbers of days for things on the face of the model law, because I don't think that would be. I think that would be unhelpfully prescriptive, given the wide variety of circumstances for which the model law has to cater.
Yes. Okay. So I think you've argued that point. The query. So points that were covered from by the two previous speakers. Is there further comment that we could take from the floor? Going once. Going twice. I think, Madam Secretary, over to you in terms of where we are on the agenda. Please, can you give us some guidance on this?
If there are no further comments, Prof, we may adjourn the meeting. I would say a few things just to close the meeting, and we adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam SG. So if there's no further comments, colleagues, and once again, I'm looking at the list, and I don't see any last questions or inputs. Then I think we're drawing to a close. And in terms of the agenda, oh, is there a voice?
Yes, I'm here, David Mwakapala from the University of Dodoma, Tanzania.
Please go ahead, sir.
Yes, I want to contribute a little bit concerning this public financial management and the parliamentary, specifically on the issue of the control of the public management. I think also SADC member countries should put emphasis concerning the office of the Internal Auditor General, or other they call the controller, controller and auditor general. This is very important for the control of public fund, because we've experienced in most of African countries, if there is no effective audit, if there is no effective evaluation of the public fund, they tend to misuse the public fund. So I think also the emphasis should be put on concerning the office of the Controller and Auditor General, to make sure that the funds that are allocated to various ministries, departments, and agencies are used as planned. As we can see, a lot of challenges in Africa, that the budget are good, but the execution of budget is very difficult. So I think there is need for the most of these SADC members also to put emphasis on how they can control this public fund, specifically on the expenditure side. It is a very big problem. We can see that most of budget are executed below 50%. So I think more emphasis also should put on the control of this public fund, but also the execution should be very much emphasized. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave.
I agree that those matters fall within the functions of the Controller and Auditor General.
Thank you very much.
Perhaps one quick one.
Yes,
from Lusaka, Zambia.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Dr. Chungu Mwila from the Zambian Open University. I just wanted to, I didn't hear more about when the professor talked about the taxation in the proposed modern law. What provision is there for the widening of the tax base? Because one of the major constraints or problems that SADC member states face is to generate enough revenue to run their economies. So how do we provide for the widening of the base? Secondly, we watched a video, and the focus or emphasis was basically on these illegal outflows of financial resources out of Africa, and of course it goes out of the SADC region. How does this model law address that particular concern? Those are my two issues I would like Mr. Greenberg maybe to address or share some ideas.
Yes, I'm grateful to Dr. Chungu Mwila for those observations. The wider tax base, widening the base of taxes is of course a question of fiscal policy, and the policy of taxation is not for this particular model law. what I think we can do and do achieve in the model law is ensuring the transparency and accountability around the fiscal base that is used. And that will enable people to identify whether an appropriately wide fiscal base is being applied. So we have to distinguish here between fiscal policy, which is not for this model law, and the ability of this model law to reflect aspects of fiscal policy and enable them to be controlled and indeed therefore changed in accordance with the procedures of the model law. And that, I fear, is my answer to, is broadly my answer to his second point as well, because again, the corruption and money laundering and other forms of illicit financial flow are a matter for the criminal law. It is not in the public financial management model law that we can set out, or indeed needs to, because in general there are criminal laws around those things. But what we need to do is ensure that there is enough transparency and accountability in the system for managing the public financial management to expose breaches of those criminal laws. So in response to both Dr. Chunga Mwila's comments, my response is that both the issues that he raises, both of those issues can be ameliorated by the model law to the extent that we give facility for exposing and understanding them better, but in neither case is the policy of the tax base or the policy of the anti-corruption criminality a matter for the substantive provisions of the public financial model law.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, colleague, for that comment. Mr. Klaus, I see your hand raised.
Yes, sorry, if I may, I just have one final comment, and thank you very much, Professor Greenberg, for the clarification. I'm not a lawyer, so therefore I'm not so familiar with the phrasings and so. On the debt management strategy, I'm wondering whether there should be some, or whether the government of each country should be required to set certain targets, fiscal targets in terms of total public debt deficit, but also debt servicing cost and yeah, other indicators of total debts. I haven't seen any mentioning in that section.
No, I'd agree with that. It's not mentioned, but I agree with you that that could well feature in the debt schedule, and I think that is something that would probably be helpfully addressed in some of the guidance around the contents of the debt schedule under the guidance clause. So I agree. I think that would be a helpful development.
Good. Are we on the last round again of comments, questions? I think that Mr. Greenberg, the point made about what are the limitations and where, and the issue about transparency, accountability, which one needs to enact. And other aspects of the law taking the issue for corruption and illicit financial flows. I think there's a distinction is an important one about precepts of where the model law applies and areas or territory where it cannot extend is an important principal point. Yes. Colleagues, Are there any issues that are burning issues that have not been addressed thus far in the conversation that you would like to put forward? In this last round of questions we take. Okay. I think we could draw the session to a close. Thank you, Mr. Greenberg, for your patience and your willingness to engage with delegates at this meeting on some of these details and complex issues regarding the model law. And it's good to note that colleagues are invested in this process and are supportive to SADC PF in the finalization of this. I draw this part of the session to a close, and I'll hand over the agenda to the SG for further guidance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much, Dr. Greenberg, and all participants gathered here today. Indeed, your comments have been quite useful. And as we note that this is the penultimate session in our consultation process, we will take the issues and comments that have been made to the working group. Dr. Greenberg will consider and see what is feasible to be integrated at this point. We will be taking this model law for validation from the 27th to the 4th of May for all the members who are nominated to the SADC Parliamentary Forum to go through the model law clause by clause and to make inputs. You are welcome to basically also collaborate with the members of parliament in your own countries and assist them with the necessary technical backstopping that they may require as they review this particular regional model law, so that the model law is passed by them and not through them. I also wish to appeal to you once more that the strong balance that we require between members of parliament's mandate and particularly their representativeness is important in them being effective. We call upon you to really engage with your parliaments at national level to contribute to the capacity development process of members of parliament in this particular area. As a SADC Parliamentary Forum, we'll reach out to you to ensure that any capacity requirements that come to us as part of the post-adoption strategy, we do engage you. So kindly send your emails if you are interested in collaborating with the SADC Parliamentary Forum to look at best ways of how we can meet the capacity requirement needs that have been tabled before us. It will not only be for those of members of parliament. We've heard from other various groups that were requesting us to look at how we build the capacity going forward. We also are aware that there'll be opinions which are complementary, and some will diverge in relation to powers of the Public Accounts Committee. It's critical that any PFM development or reforms takes this on board, because it will improve and strengthen the oversight capacity of parliaments. Kindly assist us in this regard to package relevant messaging around this particular component of the model law, so that it does not go out there as a conflict that may result in a blurred separation of power issue. And also to indicate that you can email us at pfm@sadcpf.org so that we may together design and implement tools that may be required beyond this process. I thank you for your participation and look forward to hearing from you on this endeavor. Thank you very much, colleagues. We may adjourn ITU.